We're Embrace the Sucks 21.
Yes, we are.
I'm Spencer.
And I'm Daniel.
We've been on a bit of a rally kick as of late. So we're going to look at this video from Driver 61, Group B, when rallying got too fast.
Okay, when it got too fast. In my mind, it's always been too fast for what they're driving on.
That's what you were saying right before it came on. So should be interesting to see what it is they did, and as opposed to just checking out the clips from the mighty Mr. M on these rallying videos. So we learning today, I guess. Group
B was the one that was banned first, right? Or was it C?
I think so. I think it was B, but I could be wrong on that. We'll find out soon enough, though.
All right.
3, 2, 1.
The Audi Quattro, Lancia 037 and the Peugeot 205 T16, some of the most iconic names in rallying. Cars that pushed the limits of what was possible in a way that we haven't seen since. It was called Group B and is still held as the golden era of rallying. Group B was a class where manufacturers were allowed to go all out with almost unlimited power, crazy aerodynamics and new exotic materials. It brought about new technologies like four-wheel drive, semi-automatic gearboxes and clever turbocharging systems. However, it was only for the bravest of drivers. The hugely powerful cars needed a lot of manhandling to thread them through the tight, twisty stages, away from huge drops and dodging a sea of spectators. But how did this come about, and what can we learn from the crazy cars that won in the Group B era? Rallying went wild in the 80s. The FIA wanted to attract more manufacturers and so created a class that would give the designers pretty much free rein. No power limits, no regulations on boost, and whatever exotic materials you liked.
Well, the FIA created it, so that's the head of Formula One, I think.
So
could be wrong with that.
But it makes sense. You got to have like a league or classification where you really promote engineering, because everyone knows it starts with, let's say in this case, in my mind, how it starts with Group B, and then the technology gets hammered in, refined, improved, and then it starts moving its way up. It's like the beta run of where it goes.
Right. At least at the beginning it was. So to let the technology run wild and attract manufacturers into there.
Yeah.
So
smart. It's a very smart move for the sport.
Yeah, exactly.
Cars over the years have been largely based on road cars, with rules tightening and loosening on how close the relationship has to be between the stock car and the ones that actually race the stage. For example, in the Group A class, the manufacturers have to produce 5,000 road-going versions of the car before it is allowed to compete. In Group B, to lower the costs and interest manufacturers, they ruled that only 200 cars needed to be produced. Group B also allowed almost endless modifications to be made, meaning the rally cars were nothing like the road cars at all. This approach really worked, attracting many manufacturers to Group B, names like Lancia, Porsche, Peugeot, Audi, Toyota, Ford, as well as so many more. Lancia took the Drivers' Championship.
Wow. So it worked. It worked to what you were saying. It worked to get more manufacturers in there with basically no rules, and hell, you only got to make 200 of them.
That's crazy. That's crazy. Because I feel like, what I love from rally is that like you see a version of those cars on the road, right? And I like that. Like, okay, that can become this or something like that. If I put enough money into this car, I can make this frame into that car.
Right. It's the appeal of that, a NASCAR, any stock car series. And I guess, I don't know if you could consider this a stock car series. I guess you could, because there's real life counterparts that you could purchase.
Yep. Yeah, you're right. Because if something was damaged on the car, you could probably as structural damage, you could probably, I could just use the chassis off that car and we'll be good to go. I think stock, right? Stock, right?
Stock.
Yeah. Okay. Not like Formula One. It's completely different.
Yeah. I mean, those are definitely the rules in the 80s and into the 90s too.
Yeah.
Championship in the first year of Group B with the 037. It was the last rear-wheel drive car to win in the WRC. It was incredibly light, using fiberglass and Kevlar for the body, and was powered by a mid-mounted 250 horsepower engine. It has much larger wings than many cars of the time, with a huge rear spoiler to stabilise the car at high speeds. It was supercharged to avoid turbo lag, and it was incredibly quick on the tarmac stages. However, it wasn't quite as quick on loose surfaces. So in stepped Audi with the Quattro, one of the most innovative rally cars of all time, a true game changer. It had an inline 5 engine with a very clever turbocharging system that produced over 450 brake horsepower. Damn. It had a small valve that kept the turbo spooled even when off throttle, meaning there was very little turbo lag, making the car quick out of the tight turns. The Audi also had a very aggressive aero kit with a huge spoiler at the front of the car and an even bigger wing on the back. This was one of the first sophisticated uses of aerodynamics in rallying. Drivers said it made the car extremely stable at high speed. The insane power was put through a clever semi-automatic gearbox and drove all 4 wheels. It was the first car to use a 4-wheel drive system effectively. Before this, many manufacturers stuck to rear-wheel drive as they thought the additional weight would outweigh any time gains from the extra traction. And yes, the Audi was very heavy, and the 4-wheel drive system meant the weight was higher up than you would like in a rally car normally, but despite the compromised dynamics, it worked. The Audi had more power than the rest of the field, but could also use it more effectively, deploying more power even on surfaces like gravel, dirt and ice. Audi won its first race with the car and didn't really stop after that. They shaved seconds, if not minutes, off stage times. The Audi 4-wheel drive system really changed the game in rallying.
Yeah, you get those aerodynamics in there, and you get an all-wheel drive car, like, and it handles a lot better. Yeah, you're unstoppable at that point.
I would have loved to have been like the announcer at the first time, like the Audi Quattro actually came out of the gate. Like, look at this, look how bulky it is, look how heavy it is. But look at the power. Like,
It's heavy, but it'll go. It'll go. It can navigate.
It was like almost double than what the other one was that he was explaining. The last 2-wheel drive to win it. This Quattro was like double the horsepower. It's crazy.
It's something you don't really think about with that style of racing. You don't think aerodynamics come into it because it's a road course type thing and you're navigating, so you don't think aerodynamics come into play at all. But there are straights in there, and to get a launch off of a corner to shave off time, that's important. So,
it's very interesting to see that because, like you said, I would never think aerodynamics when it comes to rally. I think of aerodynamics, F1, NASCAR, places where it's like set, like repetition or straightaways or flats. I mean, granted, I know F1 courses are all over the place. I know that, but the tarmac doesn't look like a backcountry road.
Correct.
I think performance when I think aerodynamics.
Right. And there's not a lot of passing involved with this, and not a lot of slipstreaming. So you wouldn't think it comes into play, but apparently that's not the case.
That's crazy, man.
Yeah, man.
But the Audi dominance didn't last long. Peugeot came out with a car that would expose the weaknesses of the Quattro. They used a similar 4-wheel drive system, but packaged it very differently. Their secret was that they really nailed the car's dynamics. They built the car to look like the road-going 205, a small hatchback. It had a very short wheelbase, which generally makes cars more nimble at low speeds with the trade-off of less stability at high speeds. However, rally stages are often so tight and twisty that this strategy paid off for Peugeot. They also did everything they could to keep the weight central. They fitted a 1.8 litre engine in the middle of the car, although it didn't have the clever anti-lag system that the Audi did. So the drivers used an old trick to keep the turbo spooled up. They left foot braked for the corners while staying on the throttle. This kept the turbo spooled up and gave them immediate power on the exit. But what was really unusual about the 205 was the orientation they mounted the engine in. Normally, race cars have longitudinal mounted engines with the crank parallel with the direction of the car. However, Peugeot fitted it in a transverse orientation, and instead of mounting the gearbox below the engine like in the Audi, Peugeot mounted it to the side. This meant that the majority of the weight in the car was between the two axles and could be mounted lower, making the car much more nimble and responsive in the corners. Low centre of gravity means the car doesn't roll too much, and if it's in the centre of the chassis, the car is easier to rotate in the corners. The 205's weight distribution wasn't 50-50 though, it placed around 60% of the weight on the rear wheels. In simple terms, rearward weight distribution promotes oversteer and frontward weight distribution creates more understeer. This rearward bias meant the car was easier to turn in and control through the turns. You can really see this if you watch the Audi through the corners. The Audi was very front heavy and produced a lot of understeer. The drivers are trying to neutralise this with the throttle, but they have to correct the car several times through the corner. The Quattro understeers, then oversteers.
I have a question. So you're the motorsports head here of us two. Understeer, oversteer. What am I looking at? If I'm looking at a car that's understeering on a turn, am I looking at the front of the car slowly adjusting and the rear kicking out? I'm trying to figure what that means.
No. Understeer is NASCAR term for tight, which means the car doesn't want to turn. It like the front keeps wanting to go straight and not go through the corner. Whereas oversteer, that is where the rear end is kicking out and it wants to spin the car around. So it doesn't want to go straight.
Got it.
So that's what that is. And
got it.
From what I'm seeing here is that the Audi had too much understeer, like you had to keep correcting it in the corner, which means you have to lift your foot off of the accelerator to make sure the car would go through the corner. Whereas the Persian one has more oversteer, which means you can more easily drift through a corner.
Got it.
Save time.
So oversteer means your front wants to go, or your front doesn't want to go. Understeer means your ass wants to go. Like
no. It's the opposite. It's the opposite.
Okay, got it.
Understeer, it doesn't want to turn. Oversteer, it wants to turn too much.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Then understeers again through a turn. The drivers really have to wrestle it through the corner. The Quattro was by no means an easy car to drive. Now look at the Peugeot, there is one smooth input on the steering and the car looks much more balanced and easy to drive. There is no wonder it was quicker. It's incredible to watch as these drivers control the car when at crazy speeds on tight and twisty rally stages. Also not forgetting they are threading the car through a sea of spectators on the stage. But why are the fans allowed to be so close to the cars? The stages are public roads, meaning anyone could go and spectate. However, it meant that many got extremely close to the cars. Back then, people did get hit, but it was considered to be part of the challenge for the drivers. They often kept it pinned and had to hope that the fans would get out the way in time. This guy even had to jump over a passing car. Many manufacturers understood that Peugeot's approach was the way to go, all producing smaller, short wheelbase cars with all the weight in the middle. MG created the Metro with a distinctive boxy shape and a huge front wing, and the Renault 5 took a similar approach too. However, it was Lancia that did it the best. They finally scrapped rear-wheel drive after being uncompetitive all year, so they created the Lancia Delta S4, a short wheelbase four-wheel drive monster. Firstly, they developed an engine with a genius twin charging system. They fitted a supercharger to avoid the lag of a turbo, a bit like the Lancia 037. However, this created less power at high revs. As a supercharger is directly driven by the engine, it can provide boost at low revs, but saps more and more power as the revs climb. So what Lancia did was fit an additional turbocharger that would provide boost at high revs. So low-end boost was provided by the supercharger before cutting out and letting the turbo take over at higher revs. This meant the Delta S4 was amazingly powerful and had the grip to put it down onto the stage. It took many wins before eventually bringing the Group B era to a close. This era of rallying was amazing to watch. Incredibly fast cars and amazing drivers all pushing to the limits of what's possible. There were different winners every year and cars that looked remarkably different with incredible engineering. However, you can't ignore the fact that it was extremely dangerous. The cars were too powerful, difficult to drive, and not enough emphasis was put on the safety of drivers and spectators. The biggest issue was the minimum weight rule. Cars could weigh as little as 890 kilograms. So to be competitive, manufacturers would do anything they could to get this limit down. This created a breed of cars that were very fragile and not up to the job of protecting drivers in a crash. Many of the drivers explained that if this weight limit was higher, more strengthening could have been added to better protect the drivers in a crash. Several huge crashes happened. In Portugal, Santos crested a rise in his Ford RS200. He lost control and went off the course, horrifically injuring 31 spectators and killing 3. All the teams immediately pulled out of the rally and it left Group B hanging on by a thread. A few months later, the final blow came. Lancia's Henri Toivonen was the championship favourite when he lost control late in a fast turn. He was winning by a huge margin when he and his co-driver Sergio Cresto came flying off the road, heading down a steep hill. The impact ruptured the fuel tank, spilling fuel over the red-hot turbocharger, sending the car up in flames. After the incident, it was barely recognisable as a car and both Henry and Sergio were killed in the crash. This led to many manufacturers pulling out and the FIA ended the Group B class the following year.
There you go. There you go. And that's why we don't have Group B no more. Because it's dangerous.
Yeah.
Like,
well, I mean, God, man. I mean, how could you even begin to start policing a public space? You can't.
You can't. It's no rules. It's the Leroy Jenkins of motorsport right there. Anything goes.
Yeah, I feel like it really ended for the sport because of the lack of protection of the drivers, more so than the death of spectators, because you can't do anything about spectators. That should not be should not be held.
You can do stuff for spectators, but that's at that point what they were doing at the time. Like they knew the risks and they knew what they were signing up for.
Yeah,
so
like you can't knock the sport by some idiot crossing the road or getting in the way. You can't, that is not the sport's problem. The sport's problem was not protecting the drivers.
When drivers are dying, then that's when they pulled out because apparently that's what they care about more. But something like this could never happen today. It's just not possible.
Definitely not any first world country. That's for damn sure.
No, I guess not, man. Nah.
No.
But hey, Driver 61, great video on this. Automatic 2 thumbs up to you.
That was awesome.
Let us know what other rallying videos y'all want us to check out. At the motorsport, that is, not the other type.
I like this because he definitely broke it down for me to understand. Like there's probably, like I said, there's some terminology you are familiar with. That's your lifeblood, is motorsports. Me, I'm like, explain it to me where I can understand it.
Explain it like you're 5 years old.
Yeah, and I got you. I got you on that.
There you go. Y'all, there's somewhere around to subscribe, somewhere to watch another video. Wash your hands, scrub your toes, wipe your ass, blow your nose, and prices suck.
Unplug and do something epic, guys.
See y'all in the next one.
Later.
Fellas, we could be that mistake. Let's do this.